I have a very special guest with me today. Please welcome Sara Best. She is a registered holistic nutritionist, consistency coach, author of Turning Off the Tap, and founder of the Consistency Coach School, which I hope you tell us more about later. I have asked Sara here today to provide information on her specialized habit reformation techniques. Sara, thank you so much for joining me on my channel today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your channel. I love what you're putting out there. I love watching your videos. I'm always excited when my little subscribe bell button comes up and there's a new video out. So I'm thrilled to be here and also really excited to talk about how we can change our habits. So I'm going to share with you, again, I work with a lot of mostly women, mostly around changing their eating habits. And there's some key things that I see people doing all the time that I just know from my work are really sabotaging people, like really getting in their way and sort of preventing them from developing those consistent healthy habits that I know they want. So I thought today I would just take you through sort of 5 things that I really think people need to kind of stop doing if they want to build healthy habits that stick. So shall I dive right into it?
Sounds awesome. Let's see if you can share your screen.
All right, let's do it. Okay. So again, these are sort of 5 things that you want to stop doing if you want to build healthier habits, because I see people have such good intentions and they know there's healthy habits that they want to develop around the way that they're eating or how they're working out. But time and time again, I see them kind of doing these 5 things and I can see it getting in their way all the time. So let's dive into it. So the first one is we really need to stop thinking too big. So what I see people do all the time is like, and it's so lovely because they have these big goals, right? So they want to stop eating sugar, or, I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to prep all my meals for the week, big, wonderful goals, all great, except that they're just too big. And what happens in our brain is like your brain, understandably doesn't like things that feel really hard. So when you, as lovely as it sounds to have a big goal like giving up sugar or getting rid of all your meals for the week, and that's obviously the end goal, fantastic, but we have to kind of baby step our way there a little bit. Now, for some people, I do find there's like sort of a small percentage of people who love to do the big things. And in fact, the bigger the goal, the better. And that kind of motivates them. But I would say that's sort of maybe 10% of the population. The rest of the population, I find sometimes sets a big goal and then they just immediately feel overwhelmed by it. And if they don't kind of do all of it, they do nothing. They get into that all or nothing thinking. So that's why baby steps can really be our friend. And you can baby step your way to the biggest goal in the world, right? You can baby step your way up Mount Everest if you want, right? So I really encourage people to just start with baby steps. And once that baby step is established, add on a new baby step and grow and grow and grow, right? So until you get to your goal, instead of just thinking about the end point, think about the first baby step, focus on that, get that nailed, celebrate yourself when you do that, and then move on. Make sense?
Sure does.
Okay, good. So the second thing that I think people need to stop doing is to stop positioning the healthier behavior that you want to adopt as something that you sort of have to do or should do. And I see people do this all the time, like that sometimes they'll fall into, I was doing really well, but then, I really deserve this junk food or whatever it is. And the more you kind of create this narrative in your mind that the junk is the treat, is the good thing, and the healthier food or the healthier habits are something you should do or you have to do, this is a recipe for failure, because again, your human brain is hardwired to avoid things that feel like pain and quickly move towards things that feel like reward. So you can see then how if you set up this narrative that the healthier habits are, like I should do this, I know I should, I know I have to, pain, right? That just automatically is playing into the fact that your brain hates all of that stuff. And if you set up sort of the junk food or the just binge watching Netflix all night as like a treat, as something, a wonderful reward, something you deserve, this is not how your brain is wired, right? This is sort of a perfect storm for making poor choices. So instead, we want to try to reframe the healthier choice you're trying to make as something positive. And there's a few different ways you can do this. I like to think about, this is one of the ways I like to work with practices like visualization, because if you spend some time sort of visualizing that future you, right, the one that has all those healthy habits, who has built this healthy lifestyle, and if you spend some time sort of, I always call it like marinating in that, sitting in how wonderful that feels, how delicious that feels, that freedom, that control, that just being at peace with yourself and your body. If you spend some time really visualizing that, then the choices, the behaviors that most closely align with that vision start to feel like a reward, like they start to feel like a treat, right? Because they're bringing you closer to that beautiful vision of your future self, which is what you really want, which is so much better than any of the sort of short-term enjoyment you might get along the way from doing other things. So again, there's different ways you can play with how you do this. Everyone sort of, I think, resonates with a little bit of a different approach, but you really want to find a way to frame the healthier choice as something you really want to do, you get to do, and all those other behaviors are actually kind of a threat to that beautiful vision you have of yourself and your life and your body and your energy and the impact you're going to have. All of these other things, they're not treats, they're threats. They're actually taking you further away from that. So again, knowing that your brain is hardwired to avoid pain and seek pleasure, we got to find ways to position the choices we want to make in a way that respects that, because you're not going to change it. Yeah, makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on to the third thing, which is people really need to stop relying on willpower. So this is something I hear all the time in my communities is, oh, I just need more willpower, or motivation. That's another word they like to use. If I could just find more willpower, I just don't have enough willpower. Usually what people are doing is they're kind of making a goal, like I'm going to eat a certain way, or I'm going to work out. And then they're just hoping that they'll summon up enough willpower to make it work. And, willpower has its place, and sometimes it can be helpful to kind of get you started, but it is a very fickle, like it disappears. It is very dependent on a lot of external factors, like how well you slept last night and what you ate yesterday and what's going on around you and your mood. Like it will disappear the moment you need it. Like it is not dependable. It is not a good fuel source for the choices we want to make, the lifestyle we want to build. It's not a good foundation. So instead, what we need to do is we need to think about how habits are actually formed in the brain. And what we know about habits, and there's been so much great research done on this, is that habits really there's sort of a cue, routine, reward. And I'm sure you're familiar with that sort of habit loop structure of cue, routine, reward. There's some kind of cue, a trigger that tells your brain to do the routine, which is the habit. And then we get some kind of reward for that. There's some kind of payoff that teaches your brain then to, next time it encounters that cue, do the routine again, and around we go in the habit loop. So we have to respect that again, right? I'm always about trying to make changes in a way that aligns with the way your brain is already wired. Let's stop fighting our brain, because we know that doesn't work. So instead, let's understand how the brain works, and let's do things in a way that will actually line up with that. And this is a perfect example of that. So instead of relying on willpower to do something like, get out for a walk every day or something like that. I'm going to walk every night after dinner, and I'm just going to hope I have enough willpower to do that. Instead, we need to set up cues, or what I'm calling here anchor moments. So anchor moments are things that you already do throughout the day. You have hundreds of them. There's so many things that you already do every day, from getting out of bed in the morning to brushing your teeth to, getting into your car, to feeding the dogs, to having a shower. Like there's so many things you already do. And any one of these could be used as an anchor moment to begin a new healthy habit. So if the healthy habit you want to create is taking that walk every evening after dinner, then think about an anchor moment that happens after dinner. Maybe it's like after you've washed up, you press the start button on the dishwasher, make that your anchor moment for heading to the door and putting your running shoes on and going out for a walk. So it will be much more reliable if you can work with this cue, routine, reward loop that your brain already does all the time, and find cues or anchor moments in your day when you can anchor a new habit in and start building it that way, instead of just hoping that willpower will be there when you need it. Okay. All right. So that brings me to number 4, which is stop measuring your success by what happened today. I work with so many women who spend so much time and energy beating themselves up for choices that they made today. And the thing is that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? We're building a healthy lifestyle here. We're not just focused on, and yes, of course, a healthy lifestyle is built like behavior by behavior, decision by decision, and the decisions that we make are important. But I think we also have to step back and we have to think about the bigger picture here, right? Transformation doesn't happen in snapshots. You have to think about the whole process. And I love the concept here of, I think it's James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, which is fantastic if anyone hasn't read it. He talks about the importance of focusing on trajectory over position. We tend to focus a lot on position, like where am I right now? What did I do right now? And if we don't think it was the right thing, we just beat ourselves up. This is not helpful because, as I mentioned earlier, we have to remember that your brain is wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So when you just beat yourself up, guilt, shame, embarrassment, hopelessness, your brain just registers these as pain. And all it does is send it wanting more pleasure. And for many of us, that means eating more not great things, trying to zone out in front of Netflix, going deeper into the not great habits, probably. And so I like this idea of, instead of focusing on position, focus on trajectory, right? We're all changing. We're all moving. Literally nothing is ever static. So you are going in some direction. You are on a trajectory. And I think it's much more important to think about, what is the trajectory I'm on? So regardless of what my position is right now, where am I heading? Even if it's just like, where am I kind of leaning? Can I even just make a slightly better choice in the next moment and the next and the next, just thinking about more where you're leaning towards. And also, that just feels better because you can look back and you can see the whole trajectory that you've been on. You have definitely, I hear so many women say, I've been doing this for so long and nothing changes. I'm still struggling with the same things. I still do the same. I still fall into the same habits. Nothing's changed. And that's just simply not true, right? Again, everything's constantly changing. You are definitely a different person than you were last week, last month, last year. And so just sort of zooming out and just being more aware of that trajectory, I think, is just a much nicer way to take this journey. And also, again, feels better, which means your brain is much more likely to want to stay on board and be excited about the process, instead of it feeling like it's so hard and you're failing all the time, which just leads you to make more not great choices. Okay?
Sure.
All right. So that brings me to the final little thing we kind of need to stop doing here, which is stop focusing on what you didn't do and start celebrating what you did, right? This kind of ties into the last point, but we are typically our own worst critic here, right? We tend to focus not on how far we've come, but rather on all the things we think we should have done more or better, right? We're always, I call it the mean voice in your head, but many of us have this voice in our head that's constantly judging us and constantly feeling like, okay, yeah, you did that, but you should have done more, or you should have done better, or you could have done this. And again, as I've said many times now, your brain doesn't react well to that, right? When it feels pain, when it feels discomfort, it's just going to go as quick as it can to its favorite coping mechanisms. And for many of us, those aren't very healthy habits. So instead, it's great to start to build a habit around really celebrating the great choices you did make. I encourage my clients to keep what I call an evidence journal, which is just literally like a little notebook. Some of them do it on their phone. Some of them actually have a physical little notebook where you really note all of the great choices you made every day, little things that we just take for granted or we just don't even pay attention to. Like you walked by the donut shop when you saw the donuts in the window and they look kind of yummy, but you didn't go in, or you had, something to eat that maybe you didn't feel great about, but you didn't have twice as much of it, or, something like that. There's so many little choices that we make throughout the day that we just breeze past, pay no attention to, and just zero in on the choices that we're not proud of. And again, that just triggers more reward-seeking behavior in the brain, which is what we don't want. So the more we can celebrate the baby steps we're taking, the more we can celebrate all the great choices we do make, it actually sets us up to make more and more great choices. Because what that's doing is it's training your brain that this is great. When I make good choices, I feel great. I get to celebrate myself. I feel good about myself. And your brain is wired to then want to do more and more and more of that. So the more we can sort of change the narrative here around not focusing on what we didn't do or think we should have done better or should have done more of, or all the ways we failed, rather to focus on all the wonderful baby steps we are taking and the trajectory that we're on, so that we can sort of train our brains that taking these baby steps really feels fantastic. So that's it. Those are my 5 little tips of things that I really think people need to stop doing if they want to build healthy habits that actually last.
Oh, wonderful. Do you want to stop sharing and
Yes.
I can ask some questions?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start from the top because that was such a wonderful presentation and there is a ton of information in there.
Yeah, great. Let's do it.
For instance, in the first, Stop Thinking Too Big, Think Smaller. James Clear's book is so helpful for anybody trying to, create new habits in their life or get rid of old ones that aren't serving them. But that ability to break things down into smaller steps makes it seem doable, right? It makes it seem like it's legitimately reachable instead of something like, yeah, that would be wonderful in a perfect life. Someday I'll lose 20 pounds or have that house or whatever the goal, even, regardless of the health. It's nice to be able to formulate it in a way that's achievable, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I love that you mentioned that there's probably a percentage of the population that works better doing an all or nothing kind of, extreme.
Some people, and you see them doing, Ironman and some people love a big goal and they love to go all in and it's like all or nothing. Some people really do well with it. Like a lot of people try that, but some people actually that really works for them. But I do find they're a minority.
Right. But I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was really interesting. So you do feel that there are certain situations or personality types that do better on a kind of, all right, this is the goal. Let's just get it done. Here are the things we need to do.
Yeah, I used to, back in a previous life, I was a nutritionist and I worked with a lot. I mean, I am a nutritionist, but I mean, I was more of a sports nutritionist and I worked with a lot of triathletes. And that was a very, they tend to sort of self-select for that kind of personality, right? They would you just give them a meal plan. They're 100% committed. Like there is no, because that's just their personality. They're just focused. They're very extreme and they're very focused on that. And so for those people, that's great, right? But I think you just need to know yourself. You need to be honest with does that work for you? If it does, that's great. Okay. But for most people, they love the idea of a big goal, but then it immediately then feels overwhelming and they do nothing or, they sabotage themselves. So you just, I think, need to be aware of how your brain really works.
Yeah, I also find that the more exceptions people make along their path, the more they tend to fall back into old behaviors. If we can just rip the Band-Aid off in the beginning, get rid of all the junk food, all the caffeine, all the things that are kind of compiling and compounding on one another and creating the problem in and of itself. To be able to take a step back and be like, do I really need this? Get a clear head and just kind of make a decision in a perspective that makes more sense.
Yeah, you're very right about that. And I know, one of the things that you talk about is sugar, and that it would be definitely, because there is a physiological, of course, impact of sugar that, right. Unless you kind of get it out of your system, it's going to continue to kind of pull you back. So sugar is a hard one to baby step your way out of. I will absolutely, because it's just physiologically, there's another layer there of what's going on in terms of creating cravings and yeah,
for sure. Okay. So I'm also curious about the people that you work with that use this approach of achieving their goal by these smaller steps.
Yeah.
Do they get to that ultimate goal, or do they kind of decide halfway along the way, I'm comfortable here?
Oh, that's a good point. No, I think most people do. I think they find enormous, they love celebrating the baby steps. In my community, we have an online Facebook group and people love sort of celebrating those little wins because it feels really good, right? And that really does create motivation to keep going and keep moving forward. They still have their big goals. Again, we talk a lot in my programs about visualization. And so they still work on visualizing that big future goal, whatever that might be for them. And the baby steps really, I think, feel motivating for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay, so you also touched on stop framing healthy choices as I have to, I need to, I should.
Yeah, you must encounter this with the work that you do.
Oh, for sure. But I feel like this is the biggest known mechanism. This is so detrimental for anything you're trying to achieve in life. So let's see. Do you recommend any strategies to improve this self-talk, like meditation and journaling?
You mean sort of the negative self-talk about beating yourself up for making those choices?
Right. Or just, recognizing in the moment, oh my goodness, I'm doing it again. I'm telling myself I have to go to the gym. I'm telling myself I have to meal prep. I'm telling myself I should do this, so they catch it in the moment and kind of frame it and start making a habit.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's about catching yourself. And that is about becoming more aware of your own thoughts, which again, I do teach a lot of meditation in my programs. And meditation really does help you it's kind of like like a workout for your brain. You're strengthening that mindfulness muscle in your brain every time you meditate. And it does teach you and train you and build a habit of noticing your thoughts. And so I do find that the more people have sort of a regular meditation practice, the more they're able to catch those thoughts that are, sort of taking them down those old paths. Because we have thought habits, just like we have habits around anything. We have thought habits, right? Most of us are thinking the same things we thought yesterday. I know every day it feels huge and monumental, but really it's probably the same things we thought yesterday and the same things you'll think tomorrow. We have habits around the way we think. And we definitely fall into patterns, as you were just saying about, oh, I have to do this. I should do this. I should be good. And the more, meditation is a great tool to help you begin to just see that, notice those, because you can't change them until you notice them, those thoughts,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And changing them into, like you mentioned, I want to do this. I get to do
I
this.
get to do this.
I love using that one when it has to do with my child. Like, Karli, this is not something you have to do. This is something you get to do.
Yes, exactly.
I'm very fortunate to have this baby. Just take care of her. She's screaming at me. Okay. But I love that you also mentioned that it's not treats, it's threats. Like,
yes,
reframe something, some kind of treat, or like a brownie, let's say you're putting it up on this pedestal, like, oh, if I'm good all week, by the end of the week, I get to have my brownie. But if you start recognizing it for what it is, toxic, like literal poisonous.
Yeah, I do this. In fact, I have an email that I've sent out a few times where I really list just the physiological things that are happening. Like when you eat a brownie like that's laced with sugar and all kinds of junk, literally what's happening in your body, like a full inflammatory effect. Your body's pumping out insulin to try and stop you from going into like a diabetic coma. It's affecting the inflammation in your brain. It's destroying your gut health. Like, it's a really brutal attack. Like, it's not, people are using brownies as self-care, as self-love. I deserve this. After the day I've had, I deserve this treat. Well, like, of course you're a wonderful person. You deserve something if you've had a horrible day, but it's not by attacking yourself with poison. That's not what you deserve. Exactly. You deserve like a rest. You deserve, a good laugh. You deserve a good cry. You deserve you deserve something, but it's not attacking yourself with junk food. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It just
compounds the problem, right? Mm-hmm. But that's often something that I help with my clients, is reframing their mind to realize that these things need to be associated with disease and illness and, ill health.
Yes, exactly. The more you think of it, you have to stop thinking about it as a treat. Otherwise you're doomed, because your brain, again, is wired to always want treats. You're never going to change that. So as long as you position the brownie as a treat, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love that you brought up that willpower is finite. It is not something to be relied upon, but also it diminishes throughout the day. I think that's really helpful to understand.
Yeah, nighttime snacking is the number one thing people ask me about. So
right. So they can like structure their day properly and make sure they have a healthy meal waiting for them at the end of the day. Or if, you realize that your willpower is finite and it's less so at the end of the day, work out at the beginning of the day, because the likelihood of us following through with things that we want to put into place towards the end of the day, it's just not going to happen if they're relying on that willpower. So
100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Also, the fact that it's a process, trajectory over position. James Clear is so dead on with that one.
Yeah.
But also I'd like to reframe it as, do these behaviors align with my goals? Like, that's always a great trajectory point, is this going to get me where I want to be tomorrow, or, a year from now, or whatever. Like, any goal. I think that's really helpful to remember.
Yeah.
And the last one on, or no, I kind of switched these two up, but I was curious with measuring your success. I love that you mentioned the evidence journal, because my clients get so excited about those little wins as well. Like, I turned down a vegan cupcake today. Like, they get so excited, and it's wonderful, whatever pushes you to the next step. So besides weighing themselves, like, are there other means of like measuring physiological changes without, like an evidence journal?
I mean, physiological changes are hard. And some people obviously are on medications and stuff. And some, I have a lot of clients that have come off blood pressure medication or diabetes medication and stuff like that, which is so fantastic. So there's those kinds of changes. But I always just like, we call them, lots of people call them, it's not mine, but like non-scale victories. Your clients probably do the same kind of thing, like NSVs. Because I think it's lovely too, because the scale is great. And of course it's a useful tool to measure things, but there's lots of things that affect the scale. And I think it's important to also be noticing non-scale victories. And things like just feeling more in control, or just being able to, you went to a place that would have before been a real danger zone, maybe for you, like a restaurant or a party or family holiday dinner or something, and you said no to the things that didn't serve you and you felt great about it. Like that's a huge thing to celebrate. And just seeing those shifts in yourself, that you're taking back control, that you have these tools, like these are all wonderful things to celebrate. Again, not only does it feel really great to just feel good about yourself, but it sets you up to make more good choices, because again, your brain is wired to follow those breadcrumbs. It wants to do more of what feels good. So when you celebrate yourself for doing those things, for changing your mindset and just changing your lifestyle, literally, you should really celebrate. BJ Fogg, who wrote Tiny Habits, who is actually the teacher of James Clear, he talks so much about the importance of celebrating and finding different ways, little ways that you can celebrate. It's great to like share with your coach or to post in the Facebook group, but you can just do little things like just kind of give yourself a fist bump, or just like sing your favorite little celebration song in your head, or give yourself some kind of gold star, however you want to do that. It's sometimes it seems silly, but it's really important part of the puzzle in terms of how your brain is wired for habit. There has to be some payoff. There has to be some reward for the habit loop. So sometimes we need to create those for ourselves. And so it's really important to find whatever silly little way feels good to you to celebrate. To maybe you have a friend that you text and you have an emoji or something that you guys share every time you have something to celebrate, but finding some way to celebrate is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that accountability partner is really helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did you become interested in this career? Did you ever suffer with weight complications or health issues of any sort?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely how I came to it. I had struggled with food all my life. Really. I mean, I was really an emotional eater. I was like the nighttime binger. Like I would do really well, mostly for the day, make healthy meals during the day. But then once like my husband and my kids were in bed, it was all about the sugar and the potato chips and just binge watching TV. And I would just eat until I was nauseous, and I would hate myself every night and promise I would do better the next day. And I just never did it. And I actually in part went to school to become a nutritionist, because I thought that would be my way out. I thought that if I just knew exactly what I should eat, then it would be easy, right? Because I would know exactly what I should eat and how much and when. So I went to school and I did learn all those things, and absolutely nothing changed. I was still doing the same habits because I hadn't changed what was going on up here, right? I hadn't changed how my brain was wired around food. So all that information wasn't really helping me. So that's kind of when I put these things together, that, it's not just about the food. Like, of course, I'm a nutritionist, of course, I'm passionate about healthy eating and the importance of eating a healthy diet. But I just really realized there's this other piece of the puzzle too. There's the knowing, but then there's actually also the doing. And some of us I think like we're sort of drowning in information about what to do, but the how to do it, when we have all of this old wiring around food in our minds, is the tricky part. So that's kind of how I got into this sort of subset of this, and why people joke now that I'm the nutritionist who never talks about food. Because really, I just think this is such an important missing piece of the puzzle. It was for me. And even though I tried every diet, like I did Weight Watchers, I did all of them, basically everything. And learning this part of it is really what eventually changed things for me. So that's why I love sharing it now with others.
Thank you for sharing that. That brings it all together. Yeah, I feel like most people interested in this career path definitely have some background like that, for sure.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard to do that. I don't know if you can really do this work if you haven't experienced some of these things yourself.
Mm-hmm. What is the greatest struggle for most of your clients? If you had to pick just one.
Oh, if I had to pick one, okay, this might seem a little bit woo-woo and out there, but I would say not feeling their feelings, using food to manage feelings instead of just allowing feelings. Most of my clients are eating because they're stressed, or they're worried, or they're bored, or they're anxious, or they're sad, or they're lonely, or they're angry, or, whether consciously or subconsciously, that's usually why they're turning to the food. And so I really feel like, we live in a culture that doesn't do well with feelings sometimes. We struggle with feelings. We don't really like showing feelings. We'd prefer to, numb or avoid them in some way. And that, I think, is often what creates these problems with food over time. again, and then just become habits. They become sort of who we are. So I really think that I just think it's a superpower to be able to just feel your feelings instead of eating your feelings or shopping your feelings or using social media to avoid your feelings or whatever we do. I think that being able to just sit with your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, I think is really like a superpower. And I think that would be the biggest thing that would help people change around food personally.
I really respect that. Thanks for bringing that.
Yeah.
So one last question. How can we get in touch with you, or if somebody wanted to work with you one-on-one, how does that work?
Yeah, well, I don't do one-on-one work anymore. I just do group programs. My flagship program is called Change Your Brain, Change Your Body. And if you go to sarabest.com, you can get information about that. I also just launched a fun little quiz for people if you want to learn more about sort of, I find that there's different sort of brain eating languages. They kind of like we have love languages. We also kind of have eating languages, and everybody kind of falls into kind of predominantly one category. So I have a fun little quiz it's at sarabest.com/eating quiz. If you want to check out the quiz and find out what your brain's eating language is, it's kind of helpful to learn how you can kind of get your brain on the same page.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Sara. This was very enlightening. I hope to have you back sometime.
Thanks so much, Karli.